Education Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. I'm going to start out this evening on our agenda with general business. Stacy, could you please verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has been.
Thank you very much. At this time, we have an opportunity for any correspondence or any citizens that have joined us this evening. Stacy, do we have any?
We do. We have one person who would like to address the board members.
Okay. I just have a little script to read prior to. We are now at the section of our meeting where there is an opportunity for individuals to speak. As has been past practice, each individual will be limited to 3 minutes to speak in order for us to hear from our community and to get on to the rest of our agenda. Stacy, if you could please time the speaker. They have 3 minutes. And then at 2.5 minutes, if you could let them know so they can wrap up their comments. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language in any manner, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at any future Board of Education meetings. And at this time, Stacy, you could bring in the one person that we have joining us tonight, and they just need to begin by stating their name.
Okay. I had now unmuted Jennifer Rath. You may speak to the board members now, Jennifer.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Rath. I am a teacher at Butler Middle School. I teach French and world geography. And I am here tonight just to give you an update regarding the proposal to reduce elective minutes in the 8th grade that was brought to you in the fall in order to increase literacy minutes. Since I was so vocal in the fall, I feel that as part of my responsibility to keep you in the loop and to provide transparency from a teacher perspective as we move through the process, so that it just doesn't snowball and come all at one time when it's proposed or when the new proposal is on the table eventually. So first of all, I wanted to say that I feel that slowing down the decision-making process was an excellent move. I feel that it is leading to more staff input. And that was one of the major things that I think all of us wanted moving forward with any plan. And just to give a brief overview, the scheduling committee was appointed by administration, at least it was appointed at Butler. I'm not sure how the members of the scheduling committee were decided upon at the other 2 middle schools. The committee is district-wide, and it has representatives from all the content areas and grade levels. So we thought that was important. So far, they've met as a whole group a total of 4 times. The last time was today, so I don't really have any information on that yet. But the first 2 meetings were largely informational, much like was presented at by the principals in the fall, where it was kind of like looking at the bigger issues and what goes into scheduling in general. And then from there, they kind of narrowed things down. At the 3rd meeting, I believe, the committee was told by the administration that a non-negotiable was increasing literacy minutes to implement the CLM curriculum in 8th grade. That was decided upon by administration as one of the non-negotiables. But it was put to the committee to go back to the teachers in their respective schools to solicit their opinions on whether we should change the schedule to an 8-period day or keep it as a 7-period day. There are pros and cons that were
30 seconds
that were given for that. And that was the point that they got to at that meeting, the 3rd meeting. Teachers since then have been bringing up questions that kind of go against that non-negotiable. So why are we still doing this if there hasn't been any evidence presented towards the fact that there is no fact that has been proven that minutes increase proficiency in literacy? Moving forward, thank you.
Anyone else this evening, Stacy?
Nope, everyone else that's attending is a district person.
Thank you very much. That concludes our general business section of the agenda. At this time, we're going to move on to action items. And the one and only action item, approval of the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting minutes from our March 3rd meeting.
Greg, teaching learner minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you, Bill. Do I have a second?
Mute your mic, Joe.
Pardon?
About that, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Como. Any questions, discussion, comments on the minutes from March 3rd?
I have one suggestion.
Yep.
Thank you, Greg. If you were to look at the approval of the minutes, it said the motion carried 4-0 with one abstain. I think when we have votes where they're not all unanimous, I think we ought to put the names of the people behind how they voted. I know other committees have done that.
Okay.
And I was the person who abstained on that vote. So
Because you were absent. Yeah, you were gone. Yeah.
the previous month I was gone. Yeah,
Right.
I didn't feel comfortable
Sure.
approving those minutes. So
Sure.
I will do that going forward. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, discussion on the minutes from March 3rd? Okay. This item has been properly motioned and seconded. Stacy, could you please take a roll call vote, please?
Joseph Como,
aye.
Kurt O'Brien,
Aye.
Amanda Roddy.
Aye.
Oh, she's got, are you muted, Amanda?
No.
Oh, okay. Did you say aye? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Aye.
I apologize.
Okay.
Baumgart,
Aye.
Greg Dietz. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much, Stacy.
Thank you.
Moving on to our discussion information items. We start out this evening with an overview of elementary phonics ward study. We have Melissa Yao with us this evening, as well as Emily Freeman. Phonics ward study is up for review in our curricular design process tonight. Melissa and Jennifer will be sharing the second session of the three-part series, the information process and the recommendation for a phonics ward study resource. The third presentation will be in May as an action item. This April presentation will include teacher feedback from the pilot, information on cost, suggestion of our professional learning plan, and suggestions for grade levels for the new resource to begin in 2020-2021. So at this time, I would ask Melissa and Emily to take this item and give us your presentation, and we'll have some time with follow-up questions and discussion.
Great. Thank you. I believe that you can all see me and hear me. We just need Emily's video and mic on as well. And Stacy will be sharing the presentation. All right, we have Emily on now as well, so we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you for having us back again this month for the second part of our presentation around the elementary phonics and word study. Once again, I'm Melissa Yao, Director of Elementary 4K through 5, and we have Emily Freeman joining us as well, one of our district CLM coaches. You can go to the next slide. Last month, we shared the current need for enhancing the opportunity for our learners around phonics, and we provided some research around the process that we are taking and around the pilot of the phonics resource that we have going on. Tonight, as Greg mentioned, we're going to share our findings from the feedback from the teachers of that pilot. We're going to share a little bit with you about the resource. And we're going to share with you the cost and a potential learning plan if this resource does move through approval of how we support teachers with their learning. Slide. Just wanted to come back to the foundation of our comprehensive literacy model in the school district of Waukesha. Once again, language is the foundation that holds up our reading and writing, and in that foundation is phonics word study. And so we know that having a strong phonics approach will only enhance our reading and writing for our elementary learners. Go to the next slide. In our comprehensive literacy framework, this visual represents the components of that framework. So in the yellow, green, and pink there on the left side. On the right are the instructional practices that we use to engage students in that learning. The yellow boxes on the left represent the elements of a strong phonological and phonics word study instruction. We would hope that these elements would be mastered by our learners when they leave elementary school. In the school district of Waukesha, we have found that we need a stronger phonics present, and we researched programs and decided to pilot the benchmark phonics word study workshop. And so we're going to give you some more information about that in these upcoming slides. Stacey, you can go to the next slide.
So we wanted to show you what it looks like in a week in first grade and in fifth grade. So you can kind of see the two ends of the spectrum for this program. First grade, kindergarten through second grade is a 5-day program that starts on Monday with the introduction of a new phonics pattern. They do that through shared reading. And in this example, short A is what they're learning about. On day 2, they really put that practice into writing. So they learn how to stretch for the sounds and how you spell that pattern that they were learning about. On day 3, they read a text, which is considered an accountable text because it's designed to give kids an opportunity to apply the phonics pattern and high frequency words of the week. On day 4, then they continue to practice that application of skill in reading and in writing activities. And on day 5, it's a review of that skill from the week as well as skills from past weeks, and an opportunity for teachers to monitor progress so that they can inform their instruction going forward. The program also includes suggestions for how to respond in small group instruction to students who on those monitoring progress days, you're seeing need some extra support. Can you go to the next slide, Stacey? And then in fifth grade, it's a 3-day whole class routine. That's the same in third, fourth, and fifth grade, with days 4 and 5 having options for small group instruction to support students who need some extra practice. But on day 1, again, it's the introduction to the phonics or word study skill. So in this example, they're working on prefixes. On that second day, again, it's an authentic text, an accountable text that gives students opportunity to read a real text that has a lot of opportunities for them to practice decoding words that have prefixes in them. 3, opportunities to build their fluency through rereading and also connecting it to writing. So there's often an opportunity to do a summary of the reading they did because by doing a summary of the reading, they're going to have an opportunity to write with words that have prefixes that they're using from what they had read. There's also a dictation on day 3, which looks very similar to a spelling test, so that the teacher can use that to monitor progress and inform what small groups might need to be happening on days 4 and 5 to support students who need some extra practice with the skill from that week or skills from past weeks. Can you go to the next slide, please? And our findings were very, very positive. There were some comments. These come right from the survey we had teachers do. Kids were very engaged in lessons. You could tell that kids were thinking deeply in the sorts. And that means in the program, there's a lot of sorting of words by patterns or by if it's a noun, verb, or adverb. So there's lots of different ways that kids are working with words. Lessons were predictable, structured, hands-on with sorts and materials. I loved the ease of the materials with the workbook and the notebook. The plans were easy to follow. This was important learning for fifth graders who haven't had phonics instruction in years. It was eye-opening to see the gaps in learning that we were filling. This is from a teacher at Hillcrest, and then a fifth grade teacher at Whittier said, I loved everything about it, very systematic, easy to follow and plan. Lessons kept the same format week to week and helped to build a routine. My favorite part was how much the students enjoyed doing this. So many of them expressed their positive opinions on the program. So that structure that I was just telling you about repeats week after week. It just changes the skill. So you can see that the teachers and the students appreciated the structure and the routines that they were able to build. You can go to the next slide, Stacy. From a first grade teacher at Whittier, I liked how it tied in phonics. I like how it tied in phonics within text. It was a graduated release throughout the week on skills, and skills were reviewed from previous weeks. Spelling tests improved after the first week. And a third grade teacher at Hillcrest, where to begin? It was interactive, involved multiple modalities, incorporated reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills, not based on rote memorization, but on spelling and phonics patterns. And children who were in small guided reading groups based on running record data were finally given pieces of instruction that were not touched on in any other program. So you can see that our findings were really positive. The incorporation with text and the fact that it is very connected to our Wisconsin standards, our reading foundational standards, and our language standards. You can go to the next slide, Stacy.
So our pilot findings were that 100% of the educators who were involved in this benchmark phonics word study workshop said that they wanted us to move forward. Some people said if it doesn't get approved and I was in the pilot, would I still be able to use the materials? The students and the teachers really thoroughly enjoyed it, and those that were in the pilot are actually continuing to use the materials right now, even online. When we worked with our principals and gave them an interactive workshop on this too, we had support from our principals. They had lots of good feedback about how they see that this resource could really help build a stronger foundation for our students and support our teachers as well. You can go to the next slide, please, Stacy. So the phonics benchmark, if we would be looking at it for grades K through 5 for 6 years, the first year beginning in 2020-2021 school year. In the cost for 6 years, it would include 4 days of training and would also include all print and digital materials. There is a digital component that allows students to have extra practice and also some online manipulatives that teachers can strategically use with students. So the cost of this for K through 5 for all of our classrooms for 6 years would be $226,000, just around $226,000 for all of that. The cost, if we went with a 1-year contract, would be about $120,000. So you can see it's a great savings and value with a 6-year contract, and all that we would be getting in that 6 years of a resource, and knowing that what it takes when you start something new, the first year of learning and getting it up and going, it usually takes about upwards of 3 years to really begin to see some long-term effects. And so we want to make sure that the resource that we're going with, that we give teachers and our learners the opportunity to be in a program that goes on a continuum and is consistent. If you would go to the next slide, Stacy. So with that, we know that for any resource that we use, any practices that we need to support our teachers in learning. And part of the cost of the program does include 4 days of training. So a lot of that would happen in front loading if this is approved, and would happen at this summer's Summer Institute. So every grade level would have a half-day training in their resources of the program. Then we would do an additional training for our coaches, a train the trainer model, so that our coaches could continue and have ongoing professional learning opportunities for the teachers in their buildings. We also have talked about making sure that we continue to support our teachers in the understanding and learning around phonics and phonemic awareness. And so we would be each month sending out little videos or one-pagers to help support the learning that teachers might need, and point to them to the right areas of the resources to help them grow their knowledge also in these areas. So we want to make sure that this training that we provide teachers would be continuous, not just after that initial training, but would be ongoing in the first few years, and then continue with opportunities as we have new educators who come into our system, and ongoing opportunities for all of our educators, supported by our literacy coaches. You would go to the next slide. So in just a moment, we will have time for questions. Once again, want to leave you with that phonics is not something that we believe is extra, that it is integral to a strong literacy program. And so we welcome your questions now.
Melissa, is there a Spanish version of this program as well?
There is a Spanish version as well. We did look at it with D. Garcia. The one thing that happens is we teach in a bi-literacy mode, and so it is English or Spanish. It's not something that teaches it connected as we do. So Dee has been working this year with her dual language team, and they have been creating resource that's based off of these same fundamentals for our dual language program, but there is nothing out there that currently aligns with the way that we teach in English and Spanish as a resource. So we did research that and look into it, and Dee Garcia has been involved with that. Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for asking that.
Greg, I'll make a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Baumgartner. Go ahead.
Melissa and Emily, I appreciated the way you put this to us. It was a very thorough presentation at a very short period of time. I like that. That you got from the teachers. I think it's kind of wrapped up in the last quote you had there from, I think it was Fontes, that this is integral to the program. And I'm really glad to see we're moving this people. Thank you.
Absolutely. We see the huge need, and that's why we're here again for a second evening with you.
Melissa, do you know if the Sunday system will still be used in the district?
Yes.
And if so, by which what population of students?
Yes, this will not be replacing the Sunday program. The Sunday program is used as a resource in our special education department. Our hope is that we will need to use Sunday less because we are reaching more students earlier, and that we're not seeing as many students who are needing that, especially at our upper grades and middle schools. But this will not be replacing Sunday. It's not intended to replace Sunday. This is intended to be that universal support for all students, providing that foundation.
I also like the fact that you received 100% recommendation from the teachers that were involved with the pilot, which is an extremely rare thing, not only here, but probably in any district. So nice job with, I think, all the groundwork and the planning that you've done to put this program out there and to put it in the hands of teachers and give them the opportunity for their input, involvement, and engagement. So thank you very much.
I can't say enough about our teachers. They were our teachers at Hillcrest and Whittier were very willing to be learners, to try something new in the middle of the year in their classrooms and give us really great feedback, listen to their students. Our coaches provided amazing support, our principals as well. All of our coaches and principals also served in on learning sessions to hear about this program and give feedback. And so it was really just a collective effort to really work to better enhance our learners.
Melissa, could you tell us what schools were involved with the pilot?
Yes, sure. It was Hillcrest and Whittier.
Those two schools. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other questions, comments from any other committee members?
Greg, I'd like to make a comment. It's Joe.
Mr. Cuomo, go ahead. Yep.
Thank you. I'm trying to wrap my head around, and Dee, I don't know if you've looked into it at all, the whole Spanish and English, the whole dual language. I'm not seeing how this would work. I don't see how it would work, just because it might be easier, let's say in the earlier grades where they're speaking 90% Spanish and 10% English. I could see there. But once you get to that 50-50 mark, I'm going, you might have to have different sets of words maybe for each language, or
Yeah,
so this, wrap my head around that a little bit.
So this would be, we're asking for this to move forward for just our monolingual students who are in our monolingual program. So for our students who are in dual language, Dee Garcia and the coaches and some dual language teachers are creating a resource and lesson so that our students, because of the way that our model works from 90-10, 70-30, and then 50-50, of making sure that students are receiving instruction in both languages and how that works. And here's Dee, she might be able to answer more to that, but we really did take a strong look at this program, as I said, but the program is English and then there's one in Spanish, and that's not the way that our dual program works. We need something that's incorporated together. So that's why we did not forget about our counterparts who are learning in dual language, or our teachers who are working there. But this program is not what we feel like would be best for our dual program. So we're just seeking it out for monolingual. Dee, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, so last spring with our dual language team, we had the opportunity to dig in fairly deeply into Wiley Blevin's work on phonics and word study. And that work is the basis of the creation of this benchmark curriculum that Melissa's talking about. We had an opportunity to not only dig into that work, but also review the curriculum that was available from Benchmark. What I'd like the board members to know is that oftentimes publishing companies will create a curriculum in Spanish as if Spanish were all you taught, or in English as if English were all that you taught. But the reality of a multilingual program is that students are learning both of these languages, and we do not want to duplicate learning. So if a child learns initial sounds of C in English, they really don't need to learn that initial sound of C in Spanish. They already know it. It's the same sound. So what we have done is we've carefully crafted a continuum of phonological learning for our students that initiates in 4-year-old kindergarten and goes through 5th grade. And it's specifically crafted to ensure that we do not have the duplication and the wasted time that curriculum created by publishing companies would have created for our students. It would be impossible for us to implement both an English and a Spanish curriculum at the same pace because our students would end up with a 3rd grade education. It would just be too much. It's too much stuff. So we are using the same 5-day type planner. So our students are experiencing the same activities, which include speaking, reading, writing, and listening to words, manipulating sounds and phonemes, building words, writing about words. They participate in dictation, reading the decodable readers, all of those things. We're very, very pleased. It's like a really beautiful product. And we feel that kept survey data from teachers, and they've overwhelmingly said how thankful they are to have a resource that is so clear and so easy to use. It's also uncovered, as Melissa mentioned, deficits in instruction in both Spanish and in English, where we experience teachers in the higher grades, like 4th and 5th grade, saying, oh my gosh, this is way too hard for our students. Well, of course it's too hard for our students. It's grade level, and we have not taught grade level content in this way. Over the course of the year, though, I heard less and less of that. Teachers liked the same thing that they like about the benchmark products. It's consistent. It provides a framework that feels very familiar to students each week with brand new skills. And it's absolutely standards aligned. So we're very excited about what we've been able to do and wish that like a company could have created it. They just don't. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit about our decision making.
It does. That helped me quite a bit to gain confidence actually in both English and Spanish. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the discussions that you guys have already had on this topic and providing some of those details. My comfort level, I know, went up quite a bit.
Thank you. Anything else from any committee members? We certainly have the right 2 people leading this on both ends. So thank you very much, Melissa, Jennifer, Dee. I look forward to, your presentation and this as an action item next month. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you all for your time. And once again, as Greg just said, I will be back next month as an action item asking you to approve this resource A5 for our monolingual students to begin next school year. So thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next this evening, for our discussion information items, we have K through 12 social studies curriculum update. We have Dee Garcia here with us to present that. She's the Director of Multilingual Global Education. The School District of Waukesha has spent the last 16 months engaging in a deeper understanding around the 2018 Wisconsin Social Studies standards. And Dee is here to overview some of the work and give us next steps as far as what's happening in the district. So welcome, Dee.
Thank you, everyone. How is everyone doing?
Good.
All right, thank you.
Staying clean?
Yeah.
Great. Stacy, are you going to drop this for me, please?
Oh, would you like me to do your PowerPoint for you?
That's okay if you'd like to do that.
I don't mind doing it. Okay. Let me just get that. I just have to share my screen just a moment.
Okay, so as Mr. Dietz suggested, we began this process in 2018 when the state of Wisconsin finally released the social studies standards for Wisconsin learners. I'm going to the next slide. Since then, we've been involved in doing some learning through our CISA organization and through DPI on the tasks that you see in yellow. So we have been really working deeply on some of the shifts in the standards and what will be required of us in practice and leadership in order to realize those shifts. We've been looking at the implications of integrating social studies disciplines, which had previously been segmented, like you might have a unit on economics and a unit on geography, and really thinking about how these interdisciplinary concepts connect. We have brought together a robust, I would say, social studies team of educators from kindergarten all the way up through administrators, building administrators. And we have begun to engage small groups of educators and actually looking most deeply at the standards and thinking about an approach to curriculum planning that's going to work for us. So while many of the start items in year one are things that have been underway, we are just beginning to get into the year two activities. Clearly, COVID was never part of the plan, so we've had some dates that we've had to cancel and reschedule in order to engage with our educator leaders and getting the work started again. So we're just in that place now where we're going to be able to reinitiate. Today, I will bring you through a little bit of the work that we've done with our 6-8 team. We decided that a 6-8 team was really important to bring together as the work that they would do could determine what the elementary looks like and feeds into, as well as what the 9-12 extends to. So let's go to the next slide. One of the things that we started out with as we began to develop this work was in the creation of a vision. We felt that our vision for this work would be the foundation upon which we could stand as the work became maybe difficult and we had some crucial conversations around content. So our vision statement, as you can see here, is connected to the state of Wisconsin social studies vision. So through the integrated study, inquiry, and application of the individual disciplines of social studies, all school district of Waukesha students will be engaged and informed so that they're able to graduate, able to collaborate, participate civically, and thrive in our interdependent world. In the link on the slideshow presentation, you can have a full link to all of the attributes that belong in our vision. We have specific attributes around what teaching and learning should look like, what teacher professionalism looks like, around curriculum choices, and finally around like student disposition. We wanted to make sure that we covered some of the facets that would determine our success in being able to bring this work to life. So as you are able to get into that vision, please feel free to read it through or ask questions of me. Let's move on to the next slide. When we were looking at our vision, we made specific attempts to connect them to the benchmarks that we've determined as a district that are important priorities for us. And one of them were the academic indicators of having participated in an advanced placement course and exam. So we wanted to take that into account. We also wanted to take into account that our students would be able to participate in community service, workplace experiences, the seal of biliteracy, and other co-curricular activities outside of the curriculum. All of those things that are things that will find a place in our vision of social studies. So we decided to take a look at some of these aspects, and we came up with an opportunity that our social studies learning should be able to equip all of our incoming freshmen, sophomore, and juniors with the opportunity to be successful in any one of our AP social studies courses, and that we would be able to ensure the scaffolds were in place for students to be able to not only access those courses, but participate in them with success. You can go to the next slide. This is just some data around I think some of the outcomes we're experiencing from South High School. We know that we can celebrate a lot of increases in proportionality in AP exam participation. However, not everything is celebratory. We still have disproportionality when we look at some of this data. And I take South as just like a representation of our district as a whole. We know that the culture is what we do. And if we can ensure that what we do in the classroom prepares students to be successful in accessing these courses and successful in completing them, then we will have built a great culture. So we see areas that we're not real excited about. We don't have the kind of participation and representation, particularly of students of color, African-American students. And a great majority of our Hispanic students are excelling because we have implemented AP Spanish Language, AP Spanish Literature and Culture, and AP Dual Language Seminar, which are very specific courses that many dual language students take. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that students are taking further AP courses outside of that area. So curriculum matters. Curriculum that ensures students can examine cause and effect. Curriculum that examines patterns of history that are repeated. Curriculum matters in terms of creating a culture of learning and engagement. And we believe that social studies holds a tremendous opportunity to ensure that. Next slide, please. So part of the work that we've been doing the last year, excuse me, is bringing conversations together between kindergarten through 12th grade teachers. We know that we need to have a balance of skill and content in our conversations. We also know that we do need to spend a significant amount of time addressing the place that inquiry and sources have in driving what the curriculum is. And that we have to begin to think about how we integrate skills for students so that they just don't have their history class, but that their history class is integrated with geography, economics, and the other disciplines of social studies. And these are conversations that need to be had K-12 because we haven't always had a very clear vision of what is expected of an elementary graduate, of a middle school graduate, and then as a high school graduate. And because those things have been maybe developed or determined by individual teachers, departments, or schools, there's been an uneven application and an uneven access to higher level learning. Go to the next slide. So just to remind you of some of the shifts that we are taking on, we are starting out with the biggest shift is that inquiry is the instructional framework. I hope to have the opportunity to present to you at a much deeper level exactly what that means, but it involves asking students to develop and or participate in answering compelling questions that could be asked over any time period in history that really describe the human condition and describe some of the they help students to be able to understand why we are the way we are. The inquiry as an instructional framework also requires us to place sources in front of students, including primary and secondary sources that allow them to make their own interpretation and allow them to examine some of the controversies in social studies and avoid the single story. We know also that we would like to have an opportunity for our students to, not an opportunity, but a robust framework in which students are able to engage in argumentation, and they're able to argue for a debatable question. For example, whether or not our revolution was revolutionary. A student could say yes or no, it was, and develop a claim, build evidence through the sources that they discover, and then provide a reasoned argument. So we're hoping to be able to do that. Our students also will be engaged in civic engagement. Civic engagement is a real world application for their social studies learning. It answers the question of why do we have to learn this? We see a real potential to pull that together into our inquiry framework. As we look at our K-12 progression, I want to remind you that we have 6 strands of social studies. There's a total of 26 standards. The social studies standards are expressed in grade bands between kinder and second grade, 3rd through 5th, 6th through 8th, and 9th through 12th. So in summary, social studies learning should begin in kindergarten on day 1. Let's move to the next slide. In bringing our team together this year, we did break up a small team of teachers that focused specifically on the social studies standards for grades 6 through 8. That team was robust in that it also included elementary teacher leaders and high school teacher leaders who specifically looked at the middle school standards. When they began to do this work, we started by looking at what is social studies, and we had an example at their appropriate level to take a look at different types of work samples that are often in classrooms during social studies learning. And we had our teachers align these work samples to standards. And what we found is that common assignments, common activities that we give students in classrooms are actually asking our students to engage in non-social studies type learning. We had an opportunity to do this with our teachers, and I think there were some small epiphanies about the amount of social studies learning that is actually assessment and practice for literacy or math or just kind of cute activities for coloring and art and things like that. And we know that we can do a little bit better with that. So we did want to have an opportunity to go through that. It's something that I would love for you to have an opportunity to engage in. So if you would like to on your own time later, you can take a look at these 3 activities and see which standards you might align them to. Next slide. Our 6-8 team also took a look at a continuum of standards. We took this one band of standards and we cut them up and removed any indicator for what grade level they were at. And we had our teachers sort them and put them into a continuum of what they considered to be prerequisite skills all the way up to final culminating skills as part of the work that we did. When we did this, we isolated the 6-8 skills then, and we asked our teachers to talk a little bit about the background knowledge that students would need in order to be able to demonstrate that the skill that you see, investigate the components of responsible citizenship, and summarize the importance of rule of law. We also looked at the level of cognition that a student would need, and we addressed some of the key academic language that they would need in order to meet that standard. We also looked at the standard just below in the 3-5 range and the standard just above to see how the continuum of learning changes in the middle years. Let's go to the next slide. We did that for each of the strands of social studies. So for political science, history, inquiry, behavioral sciences, geography, and economics. And from our experience, we came up with some themes that we felt were emerging from the work. When we began to look at those themes, we held them on specific posters that will then begin to help us form units of study in the future. You can see on the right side of this slide, we took detailed notes on what the standard was and exactly the type of cognition that is needed, the type of background that is needed. It's a very interesting document. You may want to get into it a little bit later. It's an Excel spreadsheet that has all of that work continuous. What Dan and I were able to do after we had this work completed was to cut these pieces up so that we could put history standards next to political science standards, next to geography standards, and begin to think about what sorts of storylines and themes might emerge from that. We began to ask ourselves as we did this work whether or not we were going to take a walk through time, meaning that we were going to provide some sort of chronological experience that places time in a continuum, or whether we were going to present social studies learning thematically, which might involve using several different periods of time. We came to a consensus around that and decided that we would like to do a modern walk through time, which means that we will have a social studies experience that will ensure students move along chronologically, but we will start in a way and use instructional techniques that make it very contextual to today by doing some source reading in the beginning of the units that anchor the learning to contemporary issues that students get cause and effect and patterns in political history that will get them engaged in going back further and seeking out additional sources. Next slide. So where are we going from here? The 6th through 8th grade group did a phenomenal job in digging deeply into their standards and coming up with a model. You can see a photograph of them here, coming up with a model of an approach to unit planning. We would like to take the work that they have done and take half of this middle school group and introduce them to an elementary group to replicate this process. We had planned to do that on March 30th and 31st when school went online, and we needed to give our teachers some time to acclimate to engaging their students online. And so we have postponed that process. We are just beginning to get some things scheduled virtually to allow for our 3-5 team to engage with our 6-8 team and get the same process underway. We hope to have a 3-5 map yet this spring, if that's possible. And I will be working on initiating a unit design process called the inquiry design model, and some professional learning for educators around that so that we can continue with our planning. That is the work that we have done so far for your information. I think that the unexpected nature of COVID has caused us to rethink our timeline a little bit, but we are slowly acclimating to the opportunity that online learning gives us to be able to re-engage with our educators and get our work back on track. So I'd like to open it up to questions from you all.
Questions, comments, discussions? Mr. Baumgart, go ahead.
Yes. Dee, I was kind of excited when you got to the part in there about, I think you referred to it as the inquiry method, because it's certainly what is being used successfully in AVID is the inquiry method, challenging questions that they should come up with each other and learning from that. Did you actually tie this together with the AVID story, or?
I didn't, but what I can tell you is that there's been significant shifts in learning theory and research on learning in the last, I'd say, 10 to 15 years. Comprehensive literacy is another model of inquiry. I would say that the research has been really conclusive that students that are offered the opportunity to engage in inquiry are more highly engaged and they learn more and their instruction is more rigorous. So it's just par for the course that most instructional designs are moving in this way. You might remember the adoption of the science standards and the science units that Erica Miller created for us. The sciences lead inquiry in a pretty major way, and they've led inquiry in teaching and learning for sure. So this is just another example of us all aligning around that.
Thank you for sharing
Sure.
that.
Anything else for Dee?
So just quickly, it'd be nice to have like a map where you can see the overlay of history by grade level with political science. I mean, it's not real clear to me what is taught in what way when, in terms of.
That's a great question. So that's what we're working on right now. What we have found in our standards is that the political science standards are directing a lot of the choices that we make because we see these standards as political history standards, and what is contained within them directs us towards specific content. So for grades 6 through 8, I feel like we have a continuum of learning that could be basically the design of political history since the beginning of recorded history of man and woman. But that happened in isolation of that same team seeing the grades 3 through 5 standards. The grades 3 through 5 standards are the first time when we really start to see political history and content in a visible way. For example, 4th graders have to read the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. And then you think about, well, what is the prerequisite knowledge that they need to do that? Like they need to know some things about this country to even make that contextual. So all of that work is the work that we're yet needing to do, but we're thinking on the same wavelength. We've got to develop some kind of continuum that allows for a student to engage in what I call a modern walk through time. It's contextual to brings along in a way that is a little bit more sequenced and allows them to place things in history in a way that makes sense. Right?
Right. I just, we've had these discussions at school board meetings, other school boards and other school districts where there's mandates at the state to cover certain things. Mm-hmm. And then we ask ourselves, well, are those mandates actually being followed? So, and again, I don't know if I think back to my own history, we were never taught within a context, a broader context, why things happened as they did throughout history. At least, let's just take American history as a subset. So if you go from the landing of the Pilgrims all the way through to let's say through the end of the Civil War, okay, what were all the events that tied through to that? Why did we have slavery? Why did that become a big issue? How did it affect the formation of the government? All that historical things should be in there. And then when it comes to dealing with the nations, the Indian nations, why are the Oneida in Green Bay? I mean, I don't know if anyone in the district can answer that question. Maybe they could. Why do we have this? Why do we have the territories that we ended up with down in the southwestern United States? How does that tie to migration of Latin Americans into the U.S.?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to see something that kind of ties that through, and how do we do that by grade level? How do we make that integrate through so we can better understand who we are and where we came from? As whether it's European settlers, whether it's immigrants post-World War II, immigrants post-World War I, the role of the different ethnic cultures that the European groups that founded this country. I never really had any of that in school, and I don't know if we're doing that as well, and how that overlays into our political science courses as well.
I think one of the difficulties that we are going to encounter is that we all, to some extent, believe we know the history, and that most of the record is a record of stories we want to hear, and it requires us to evaluate complex debate in history. So in my history learning, people told me what the history was, and I was not asked to ask questions about it and think about whether there were different perspectives, whether there were histories that weren't told. None of those things. I think our inquiry design model offers the best opportunity for kids to get an opportunity to take a look at some of those controversies in history and/or things that are left out. So those are all values that we have. I'd like to, offer to all of you to go back and read our social studies vision. Dan and Melissa and myself and the social studies team feels very strongly that our students need to be able to see themselves and see their families in their communities in the learning that we do. And that's a pretty robust statement. It means understanding yourself, where you are in life, where your family's opportunities are within a system. So it's robust. It's been very difficult work. It is not as straightforward as, say, other areas by far. And the only thing that I can continuously come back to is that the National Council for Social Studies in their C3 method, which is called the Inquiry Design Model, offers us the best opportunity to open up some of those questions for discovery in our classroom and accept that we are also learners of history. It's not something that's done and has no debate. Long answer.
Well, I think it's important that we look at the multicultural aspects of our community.
Yep.
We definitely have a multicultural. Southeastern Wisconsin, at least I can kind of speak for that because I live here. It's a very diverse society, and it's been that way for a long, long time. So I think the more we expand how we view ourselves, the more we'll learn about history for ourselves. And it's not just who we are here and now, it's who are those that are around us and why are they here? I think
those are great essential questions. And I think that the whole purpose of social studies is to get students to ask those questions about how is it that we got to this place? and where do we want to go next, and do I have a role in that? And so I think those are big ideas, but certainly the ideas that we want, those are the foundation of the work that we're doing. So thanks for your thoughtful questions about that and insights.
Anything else for Dee this evening?
Greg, I'd like to add on to that.
Go ahead, Mr. Como.
Thank you. The work that was done on this vision is excellent.
Thank you.
And so as you were answering Mr. O'Brien, my thoughts went to the student disposition on there. And I would be really excited to see that happening. And I would like to read that to our audience.
Please.
Learners will develop a critical lens which will empower them to be engaged and active citizens in a global society. Learners develop the individual determination to persevere as problem solvers in the inquiry process. Learners will develop the ability to select and evaluate resources for potential for bias, credibility, and propaganda. Learners will foster respectful and open dialogue of opposing viewpoints of underrepresented experiences. So as you were answering, Mr. O'Brien, my thoughts went to how there could be some fantastic discussions going on within the classrooms, and it would be really great to see our students be engaged in this manner. There's excellent parts to this entire vision. There was deep thought that went into this, I can tell. And if I could witness student disposition being like this, I would be super happy.
All would be. So the next piece of this learning really, in addition to like working with this grades 3 through 5 group, is developing the design model, and really what does that unit look like? And then beginning to think what is realistic in terms of curriculum development and teacher support. It is not easy for teachers to teach in ways that they didn't learn. So even our best teachers tell students what history is. I'll give you an example. I had an opportunity to go into a dual language classroom. The majority of the students in the classroom are of Mexican descent. And the teacher asks whether any of them consider themselves to be Native. And the kids, Native would be like indigenous, right? So the kids didn't really know. It was like a trick question. And the teacher said, well, no, you're not indigenous or Native, you're immigrant. And I'm thinking about the multiple children in the class who are named Sitlali, which is a Nahua word. These children mostly are indigenous culturally. And I think about a lot of learning that we need to do. Most of us are in a very privileged place in history and haven't had to think a lot about these things in a very deep way. But I think that we're going to have a lot of work to do to re-educate ourselves and to really make sure that our teachers feel supported in doing the kind of work that is going to be meaningful for students.
So that was an excellent example. Okay, that was really good, because I remember 25 years ago, I asked somebody in a mine down in New Mexico about whether he was from Mexico or was he from Arizona or New Mexico. And was he Mexican or was he Native American? And he looked at me kind of puzzled and he says, well, I don't think of myself as a Mexican, or he says, because my ancestors were all Native Americans. So, and the same way when we talk about movement of people across the border, I mean, like the Potawatomi have Potawatomi members that are on the other side of the border down in Mexico that would cross routinely because that's what they did for 300 years. So that was an excellent example of how what we believe, because we see them as immigrants, is different than what is really there. And we're all learning. And it's important that we teach everyone, not just about Native American, but other cultures as well. the Irish, the Germans, everybody who's immigrated to the country or has arrived in this country has a story to tell.
I think the key point here is that we would prefer to get teachers in the space of inquiry where they felt like they didn't have to give the right representation of history, but that they allow that to unfold in the types of sources they put in front of children. And that, I think, is going to be the big shift.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thanks.
Anything else for Dee this evening? Okay, Dee, thanks again for all your
Thank you.
hard leadership. We look forward to having you back in the near future, and good luck.
Thank you.
You're doing some really good work behind the scenes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Take care. Next this evening, under discussion information items, our last item, transition to virtual learning. We have Jody Landish, our Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, here to give us an update on as to how things are currently going in the virtual environment in our classroom. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Landish.
Thank you. Before I start too, I know I've said this publicly before, but I can't say it enough. You know, Dee Garcia, Melissa Yao, and Dan Keyser are some of the most brilliant, most thoughtful, the most high capacity directors that we could have working for our students and for our teachers in the district. So I just want to give a shout out to my appreciation for that team. They're just simply amazing in everything they do. So with that said, on the theme of amazing, we are now almost, we were talking before the meeting, at the end of this week, we'll approach 1 month in terms of virtual learning. And that's so hard to believe. But basically, on March 16th and 17th, with the brilliant magicianry of Steve Schloman, Brian Yearling, Kristen Bruchard, Wendy Liska, the entire tech team came together those 2 days to provide virtual learning and virtual professional development for our teachers so that we could go live with students starting March 18th. So it was really masterful what they had put together in terms of a learning platform, a common learning platform that we are operating under. To this day, they continue to be responsive, proactive, constant problem solvers. We have a tech support line, if you will, on WebEx Teams that is regularly used 24 hours a day by teachers, and there always is someone responding to them and their needs. So we, as I said, started to go up and running with students on March 18th. And we really came out of the gates as a district saying to our teachers, do your best, less is more. Do your best, less is more. And they really have adhered to that, knowing that in a way content was going to have to be put aside a bit so that we could pay attention to providing calm and providing connection and providing relationships and engagement to our students and our families. Because in a way, as some of you probably are realizing, you know, our teachers have come into the students' homes, students have come into the teachers' homes, and with that come their families as well. So there's definitely a new dynamic beyond the student that I will say has positively accelerated relationships, believe it or not. And many relationships have become stronger online that I am confident will continue to flourish when we get back in the face-to-face environment. Our teachers have just a small structure of office hours every day from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And so that is the time when we're asking them to be available to all students, for sure. Now, granted, they have many other opportunities and times that they are putting together, but that's just some of the guidelines that we had established out of the gates at the district level. We've also asked principals to just have at least once a week, a weekly staff meeting, again, to provide a connector and a communicator with staff. But after that, I will honestly say many of the magic that has happened has come organically from our teachers and from our schools, and really been attentive to what we need, what our students need, and what our families need. I just have to commend that when we put the right tools and resources in front of amazing teachers, that wonderful things can happen for students. And so I just can't say enough about the recipe for success that Waukesha has put forward with the accessibility of students with iPads, with the tech support, with the digital learning platforms that we have, with the strong grading and teaching and learning practices that we have. I can't say enough about our systems and structures that we have had in place that have allowed, I think, our teachers to flourish. Now, granted, there have been bumps in the road, but I tell you, they have come together and just collaborated together to figure things out. And couldn't be more proud of Waukesha in general in terms of, you know, a student delivery model around teaching and learning. Joe, I know you're going to add some things in the world of special education too, and I want to just want to be brief in a general overview, but certainly allow the board members to ask any specific questions too. But a pulse check, you know, as of today, as I said, going into 1 month, going this route, is that it has been challenging yet unifying, and people are coming together in a big way with huge relationships wrapping around kids and families.
Any questions or comments for Jody?
Sure, I got one.
Go ahead, Mr. Baumgart.
Well, I guess 2 points I'd like to get across because it's related to what you were saying, Jody. Number one, I've got other people that I know in other districts in other states who have no idea how to get where we got so quickly. I mean, some of them are still struggling with even getting started with these things around the state and around other states. So we do have an awful lot to be proud of there because we were up and running in 2 or 3 days. Now, there's another reason for that, and that is the reason that started, I don't remember how many years ago when we first got into the whole concept of going to, you know, our Waukesha One stuff and things like that. I mean, we've been doing it for some time now.
Yes.
So the fact that we got started on this, you know, not knowing that we were going to have a very serious need for it in the year 2020 certainly has helped us a lot, that we were willing to be innovative and start moving on this. I don't remember when, must be at least 10 or 12 years ago.
Yes.
So I think all of us should feel good about the way we started this in our district to get the district moving in the technology direction. You know, not thinking we'd be using it this way, but now being glad that we have it so we can use it this way and be, in my case, in my mind, weeks or even months ahead of other districts that just aren't doing nearly what we can do. And I've had a chance also to talk to a teacher too, and my gosh, they're doing great work. It's just unheard of. So thank you, Jody, and thank your team. And Steve too, if you're listening.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yeah, I think it's difficult for people to imagine how much extra work it is to move from the classroom to a virtual environment. As much resources as we've had as a district, it's tremendously challenging for the teachers, for the administrators, and for the parents and the kids. And really, they all have to kind of work together to make it work right. I've talked to people that said, look, I'm trying to hold it all together. I have a special needs child. Yeah, I have 3 other children. And so for the parents, they really have to work hard to make this all work along with the teachers. And the teachers are doing a great job of finding those parents that need a little extra help and making sure that somehow or another they meet the needs of that child. And, I've had people from out of states ask me, well, are they getting paid? In other words, they just think that nobody's going to school now because of this. No, they're going to school. They're just going to school in a different way. And then the other thing I'd like to comment is the way our staff and our kids have worked hard to create a community spirit, even though they're separate. And we've seen that in the Bright Lights presentation that we received. I've seen it, people think of teachers, and rightfully so, educators and our entire staff as people that are going to be there for them in hard times. And there's hard times now, and there's going to be hard times as we move through the next 6 months to a year as we try to figure out how we're going to adapt for something that we probably won't fix for 6 months to a year. We can also make it into a learning experience. Historically, we had a flu like this 105 years ago. How did it happen? Why did it happen? And what was done back then? And how did it affect education back then? Well, they didn't have an education system like we have today back then. So it's a whole different adaptation. So I think we're doing a great job on the virtual side. I think our neighbors are doing a great job in terms of the neighboring school districts. At Waukesha, we were just a little bit more fortunate that we were big enough and prepared enough that we could probably dive into this a little deeper, but it doesn't mean there was any less work. It was a tremendous amount of work for staff, administrators, teachers, and parents. So.
Great, may I?
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Reddy.
Just basically going to echo what the other 2 board members and Jody both said, but to give you a little bit of a parent perspective from from the board here, it felt like there was no lag time. We just immediately jumped into it, and I can speak for students from Summit View and Butler because that's where my kids are. My kids were so comfortable with their devices. As I'm trying to read through the instructions and things, are like, no, mom, it's like this. And they were already so comfortable with it because it's part of their everyday learning. And honestly, at first I felt like there was so much information coming from so many different avenues. And I was a little bit lost, but I think once we got our groove, now we know to go to Student Messenger every morning, and that's where your morning announcements are. And then they link everything from there. So I think we kind of got over that little speed bump there. In our daily instructions from our teachers, they're telling us, take your time, work for 15 minutes, take a break. They're encouraging the families not to overburden themselves with this because it's hard. I'm not an educator. I have 3 different kids in 3 different grade levels, and so we're getting that information from the teachers. They're saying, be sure to take a break, be sure to mix up your day so that it's not all at one time. Again, speaking like the others, speaking to other friends and families in other districts, either near or far, they're saying, wow, you guys are ready to go. Like, we had nothing like that prepared until however many days later. And I was proud to boast to say, when this outbreak started on the other side of the world, our administration was already looking at it and already making plans to a just in case. So when it hit us, you guys were ready to go right out of the gate. So I greatly appreciate that, and being able to say, they had the foresight to see this coming. And so yeah, special shout out to Summit View and Butler, to those teams over there for making my children feel so very comfortable and making it easy as a parent to make sure that they're still getting the learning that they need, and giving them some normalcy throughout their day.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Reddy. Anything else for Ms. Landish?
Como?
May I make?
Go ahead, Mr. Como.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had 2 questions written down, and Amanda, you really went a long way to helping me with them. My first question was, or first taking a student's point of view, what does learning look like? And you filled us in on some of those details, but I don't know if there are any other perspectives. I don't have children in school anymore, so I'm not witnessing this firsthand at this time. So what does that learning look like as a student?
I'm on the spot. I was going to say, but we kind of, with the board members, have representation for elementary, middle, and high.
And I would expect it to be different at each of those levels. Yeah.
So the elementary level, for my kindergartner, she gets, well, the kindergarten and second grader, they get the morning announcements from their principal that comes from Student Messenger. And then in there will be links for their FIED and their specials. And then they will have anywhere from maybe 6 to 8 activities that show up in, those two are using Seesaw, which by the way is fantastic. I love it as a parent. They use Seesaw, so they'll get their little activities. The teacher shows a maybe 30 to 2-minute video clip that's they read them. They say, okay, do you remember this from class at the beginning of the year? Let's work on our CH sounds. And so the students will get that little short mini lesson, and then their next activity will be, okay, make words with the CH sound. And then they hit a little green submit button and off it goes. And they file it into their phonics or their word work or their math folders, whatever it is. The second grader has pretty much the same things. My middle schooler, she's in Google, what is it called, Jody? Google Classroom? Yes, thank you, Google Classroom. That is above my head. She kind of does her own thing. She's in Quest. So they've always been in their own little world, but I did have the opportunity to, she had to learn a new task. So she learned how to do laundry this week. And so, but that's what which I thought was really cool. They're getting that day-to-day skills, and the teachers are putting it into their learning. And so it's cool. Now I have somebody else doing laundry at my house.
That's cheating.
Joe, at the secondary level, my son's involved with, various things with, his teachers. He's a senior this year. A lot of their work right now has been reviewing for the upcoming AP exam, which has been altered. And that'll be taken online this year for the first time. So he has time to check in with his teachers. They have group sessions and individual lessons. Like I said, a lot of it has been trying to review for those AP exams that are coming up. So I think it varies, but we've been really pleased with the contact from teachers and their availability whenever anything comes up as far as a question or concern.
Are students able to create their own groups to talk on assignments and to interact?
Yes, I know the Quest, excuse me, I think Jody, I know the Quest students, Marisa's Forever Online, going over group projects, her forensic class and different things like that she had going on. The students can link up. But I can tell you, at least for our schools, the teachers have been very adamant that the WebEx conversations are for schoolwork only. So they're not just sitting there having, I had this for breakfast conversations.
Yeah, I was gonna head in that direction. I appreciate
Yeah,
you on the foresight to answer that.
My second grader figured it out real fast, and the teachers kindly stepped in, and so we found other methods to chat.
So now, the second perspective, I'd like to take it from the teacher point of view. What does teaching look like? Was everything handed to them already prepared? Or are they preparing like way more than what they typically have to prepare? I just want a sense of that teacher perspective.
Yeah. So did they try to prepare way more than they needed? Yes. I think let me back up to say this, especially at the secondary level, we have Blackboard as a content distribution system, if you will. So we have encouraged over the years that they do put content and resources on Blackboard to be able to have that curricular content delivery model established at the secondary level. It has not been as well evolved, and for various reasons, meaning developmentally appropriate at the elementary level and at the middle level. So I will say that I think out of the gates, all of us thought that we had to do, some of us tried to just sort of place the face-to-face classroom into the digital environment, and we quickly learned that that was not going to be manageable for anybody. So I think quite honestly, through trial and error and sort of learning as you go, feedback from the students, feedback from the families, our teachers have been super responsive to say, okay, what is manageable in a week's time in terms of learning activities? You know, what standards am I still trying to progress towards in order for a student to show levels of proficiency? And I think working in that mind frame of a week at a time and trying to, again, backload the work that way has sort of forced our teachers to be have more simplicity in the learning. And I think quite honestly, when the state level and the district took away, in essence, the accountability around some of our state assessments, some of our local assessments, and the conversations that we've had about grading, I think everybody just took a huge sigh of relief, if you will. And I don't want to get on that horse too much about state accountability and testing. However, I do know firsthand from teachers that there was sort of this sigh, and then they got back to knowing they're going to do what's best for kids. They're going to have learning activities set up that are meaningful, and connecting and engaging with kids every day has been their priority.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Both of those perspectives. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything else for Ms. Landish? Thank you very much, Jody. Really appreciate the update, and want to certainly thank all the staff and administration for their leadership and all the behind the scene things that they're doing, especially Steve Schloman and everyone else involved with his team. Very proud of each and every one of you. You guys are doing a great job. Keep up the good work. Okay. We're going to move on then to the next section of our meeting is other business. Any committee members have recommendations for future meetings, items that we would put on the agenda? Okay. Okay, seeing none. Was there a comment? Okay. Seeing none, that's going to conclude our meeting for this evening. The meeting is going to be adjourned. I want to certainly thank all of you for your participation, especially all the work for Stacy Schmidt that she put into setting everything up and being the host and coordinating everything, both to, from, and after. Stacy, thank you very much from each and every one of us. You did a great job, and we look forward to continue working with you.
Thank you.
Our next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting is going to be Tuesday, May 5th at 6 p.m. And not quite sure if it's virtual or not, but stay tuned and we'll find out. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening. Nice job tonight.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Did you stop the recording?
I am doing that right now.